Okay, fabulous. So thank you so much all for your time this morning. I know all your time is very valuable. So we appreciate you carving out the time to learn more about tiny health. And this session really is designed to be a conversation. So while I have a presentation, please ask questions as things come up. If there's areas you want to focus on more, less on others, this is like the goal is to be the most useful for you. I'm Taylor. I'm the medical director here at Tiny Health. My background is I'm a MD and a PhD, and I was in conventional medicine, working in pediatrics out in Boston, and just found that that type of medical practice, while it was wonderful working with families and does so many wonderful things, was just not quite what I was looking for. And my research background is in infant microbiome. And so I was very passionate about the microbiome and wanted to go more into the health tech arena, something that was working to help empower patients and families to have more information about their health, and ideally, both supporting kids with conditions, but also working to be more on the preventative side as well. And then I very thankfully met Cheryl, and she had founded my dream company, Tiny Health. And after a couple conversations, she invited me to be a part of the team. And so I made the transition out of hospital-based medicine to Tiny Health. So it's been quite a journey. It's been absolutely wonderful. And so that's just a little bit about how I came to Tiny Health in my role as medical director here. And actually, before we go any further, I would just love to hear, I know who all of you are. I appreciate you filling out the forms. I'm the one who reads the form that you fill out. But I would love to just, have us all know who's kind of on the call. So if you wouldn't mind sharing just briefly who you are, sort of what type of practice you have. And I would love to know if you have experience with gut health tests. Is this something you currently use in your practice? And how you heard about Tiny Health. So whoever would like to start.
Okay, I will start. Hi, I'm Jennifer Nito. I live in New York, so obviously we have not been able to get stool tests here.
Yeah.
I'm a teacher by trade, but I'm also a functional nutritional counselor. And we are, in the next 3 months, I partnered with an MD and a nurse practitioner. We're opening up a cellular medicine practice. So we're going to be doing a lot of nutrigenomic testing and stool testing and all of that. So I felt like this was kind of like the perfect opportunity. I did order 2 stool tests, one for myself and one for my son, when we first heard about it through the webinar with Dr. Elisa Song. That's how I found out about Tiny Health.
Oh, great.
So, yes, that was a tremendous eye-opening webinar for me, and I would love to bring Tiny Health into the new practice. So that's why I'm here on the webinar, because living in New York, we really don't have any access to stool testing, and quite honestly, I'm going to be very honest. I don't know how to read a stool test because we've never gotten the experience with it.
Yeah. Yeah, well, thank you for sharing. And that's definitely something part of our practitioner partner program is the educational component, and something I'm so excited about. So yes, we welcome everybody with all levels of microbiome knowledge.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. Thanks for kicking us off.
I can go. Let me turn on my video. Hi, I'm Lauren. I'm a dietitian in Vermont. I have a private practice specializing in eating disorders, and I do work with some like pregnant and postpartum patients as well, and gut health as well. I mean, all of my clients tend to always have some poor gut health. So I've used some stool tests before, so I'm somewhat familiar with them. And then I came across Tiny Health, where I have a 10-month-old who has like a dairy sensitivity and some mild eczema. So I just got our Tiny Health kit in the mail yesterday to try out.
Amazing. I mean, I'm so sorry to hear about the dairy sensitivity. That's very challenging for little ones, and also for moms. I think it's hard enough to be a mom and there's a lot going on, and when you can't eat whatever you would like, that's definitely another element. Well, looking forward to seeing all the samples coming in.
I'll go next. Hi, I'm Maddie. I'm a registered dietitian with my own practice in North Carolina. I use like a functional approach. I started using I guess the GI map was kind of the entryway for me into kind of getting into all the functional labs, and have been using that for a little over a year. And then a couple of weeks ago, had a training, and the dietitian who was leading it, or well, she's also a medical or a I don't know what her full title, she has lots of different things, but she mentioned how she started using Tiny Health within her practice. And it just kind of sparked my curiosity, because my husband's a chiropractor. And so they see a lot of pediatrics and infants with all types of GI disorders. And that's just something I haven't really tapped into. So figured this might be a good place, kind of entryway, to learn a little bit more about that, and help that population a little more.
Yeah, amazing.
I'll wrap it up. I'm Courtney West. I am a pediatrician, a general pediatrician by training, but have found my way mostly into mental and behavioral health disorders. Have always been very interested in autism, so did a lot of autism diagnostics, but working in a private practice, I'm sure, you know, it's very difficult. You're seeing like gobs of patients a day. So anyway, open my own practice now. I focus mainly on that. I don't do the whole gamut, like well child checks and everything. And I had another job that I recently resigned from. So now I'm getting more back into this. Incidentally, I have 2 kids that have pandas, and that has just been a hell of a time trying to figure all of that out. And so now I'm focusing more on the functional approach, and it's just very different than our allopathic background. So I'm having to learn a ton. I started seeing an acupuncturist locally who had a daughter with autism, and she is very into gut health. She actually wrote a book about it. So that's kind of what got me into this rabbit hole. I've also signed up for an integrative psychiatry fellowship that I'll be starting this year. Yeah. And so I have just been reading a ton, and I always knew that the microbiome was important, but didn't realize just how important it was until I started reading all of the like more current research that has been put out in the last couple of years. And so I'm fascinated by it. And I think my Google searches led Tiny Health to the top at some point. And so I was like, how do I get involved? What do I do? I want to learn about it. So I'm new, but very interested in learning.
Yeah, amazing. And thanks for all the work you're doing in the psychiatry, mental health world. I know that there's just unfortunately such a pandemic of that currently, especially in the pediatric population. And, you know, I do think there's probably we know that there's a huge gut-brain axis, and optimizing microbiome health either later in life to reduce triggers of inflammation, or to, you know, identify early any imbalances to try and reduce the risk of developing those conditions. So I think for sort of all phases of life, there's, you know, a way that the microbiome can be optimized to help improve health. Well, thank you all for sharing. Oh, and I see we have one more person. Sorry, your video is under the one I could see. Good morning. Thanks for joining us.
My apologies. I was having a lot of trouble logging in for some reason into Zoom, but
I'm so sorry. There's always one person that gets the trouble logging into Zoom.
I know.
And today you were gifted
I got
that.
it.
I'm
I know.
so
I was
sorry.
lucky. So I am reading what you're asking, and unfortunately I missed everybody's. So my name is Gabriela Sheets, and I studied the early development of the microbiome. So basically how babies acquired the microbiota in early life for about a decade. So that was at Emory University, and then now I'm pretty much in private practice. I work a lot with different practitioners across the spectrum, from in the psychoanalytic to the mental health field, all the way to allopathic doctors, and a lot of naturopathic doctors, working with gut health in the early life, because I think it's preaching to the choir that it's really important. And so I consult a lot with them, and I also am working with companies like Needed, and that's who introduced me to you guys, Ryan from Needed. And I work with them to develop probiotics, and specific to specific stages in development as well. And so So yeah, so I work with a lot of moms and babies, but also practitioners and then adults, and actually 20-year-olds who are suffering a lot right now. So across the spectrum, but really my heart and passion is with the little ones, to support them in being healthy throughout their lives. And so my experience with gut tests is pretty a lot. I mean, I've been doing a lot of mostly 16S in my study,
Mhm.
and then metabolic, or more broadly and newer stuff, metabolomics more recently. But I'm really excited about this company from what I've learned and read, and I'm excited about learning about it because they have a lot of clients that I think could really benefit, especially that you guys also have vaginal and really what I've been hoping for in the space for a while. So I'm excited to meet you guys.
Amazing. Well, I love, we have a pretty wide range of types of practices, and but also, like, everybody, I just such a strong sense of a shared mission. So so grateful you all are here today. So I will just give you a brief overview about the history, sort of the long history of Tiny Health, which is a very new company. So Tiny Health started because Cheryl had our CEO and founder. She had two very different experiences with her deliveries of her children. Her first child, unfortunately, was breech and ended up having to be delivered by C-section. And she'd done all this research about how to protect the microbiome in that type of setting. And then with her next child, she was able to do a VBAC, or a vaginal birth after cesarean, in a home delivery setting. And she had, done the vaginal seeding protocol, and she had been, doing probiotics and taking all of these steps that we know have positive effects on the microbiome. And then she found there was no way for her to be able to test her children to see if the things that she was doing were having the intended effect, or if there was something else that she should consider trying. And so when she realized that there was this huge gap in the microbiome testing, she thought, well, I've done all of this work, I've done all of this research, I guess I will start it. I will be the one to bring it to the world. And so that is how Tiny Health got started, by, someone who is a mom herself and has had this experience. And interestingly, her first child has ended up developing some atopic related conditions, some food sensitivity, some food allergies, and her second child so far has not had any of those same conditions develop. And so, as we know, researchers, sample size is, that's a wonderful case study. But based off all the research she'd done, it seems like that really, it goes beyond a case study and really does go to exemplify just the power of early life microbiome, and how, our early life exposures, some that are unavoidable, like thank goodness for safe C-sections, for formula, all these things that exist to make sure that babies and moms are able to be safe, but the ability to then check in on the microbiome and make sure that if actions are taken, that they are being able to be taken and measured. And so Tiny Health has really filled the gap in the microbiome testing world of being able to provide reference ranges that are accurate and frankly, just safe for younger kids. Something that's, if you do have experience with some of these other microbiome testing companies, they say that they're not supposed to be used for kiddos in the younger years, particularly under 2. And that is because microbiomes in early life, which, preaching to the choir, I think a little bit here, but, babies are not just, when I first got into pediatrics, the thing they drilled into us is babies are not just tiny adults. Kids are not just tiny adults. They have different physiology, they have different development, and these are very important. And I think the microbiome is a beautiful example of that, where we actually want, some things that in an adult gut, we would say, oh, that's too high, or, oh, that's going to cause inflammation. Actually, if you got rid of it completely, that could potentially reduce the ability of the microbiome to properly educate the immune system. So there are such important differences in the early life microbiome. And so that is the huge difference with Tiny Health, is that we have reference ranges for all phases of life. So we did start as a company that was specifically targeting ages 0 through 3, and during pregnancy and trying to conceive, but now we have deep insights for every single phase of life. So if you're a baby, if you're a toddler, if you're eating solids, if you're eating breast milk or formula, if you're an adult who's not trying to conceive or doesn't have children, dads, we do not want to forget about dads. Dads are super important. We have insights and helpful actions for every phase of life. And so just diving into a little bit more of a comparison about the science behind tiny health. So one thing I like to point out initially is we have one of the most affordable tests on the market, particularly for how deep our insights are. So there are some other tests that are a slightly lower price range, but they use a different technology called 16S. And they also do not provide nearly the depth of insights. So for just a slightly higher price point and significantly less expensive than many other tests that are out there, we have a very affordable price point. And part of the reason for that is because we believe in retesting. If you are spending $800 on one microbiome test or with some additional labs, or it's close to $400 or $500 for some of these other microbiome tests alone, the likelihood and the ability to financially, feasibly be able to retest is not as, it's not as accessible for practitioners, for patients. And, our philosophy is test, don't guess. If you notice something that needs intervention in the microbiome, and then you take actions to try to shift the microbiome community, we believe that you should be able to have access to retesting to see, did it work and you can stop? Is it working and you should continue that intervention? Or it didn't work for some reason. Even high quality products sometimes don't work for everybody, and it's time to try something different. So that I think is a major difference between Tiny Health and many other companies, is the price point that we offer for our test.
I have a question.
Yes.
You might be getting into this, but do you use next-gen sequencing? Is that why it's much more expensive?
Yeah, so we use shotgun metagenomics, and so it is the deepest sequencing available. So we detect every single thing that's in the microbiome. So some other technologies look really for what they know, and they can go look for the things that they know and detect how much is there. With shotgun metagenomics, we detect every single thing that is there, and then which allows you to get a much more accurate sense of a true relative abundance. And I just also realized I do not have a visualization of the chat. So if anybody does chat, okay, no chat questions yet, but definitely let me know if you put something in the chat. So a shotgun metagenomics, it's really important to be able to actually know everything that's in the microbiome, because if you're not looking for everything, then your relative abundances are not really relative abundances. It's just relative to what you're looking for. And so that we'll show some examples of tests, but it's important to know the beneficial, the unfriendlies, the variable, and the unknowns to truly get a whole sense of the community. The other thing that this allows us to do using shotgun metagenomics is we have functional insights. And so that is a big difference from many other companies, is we don't just look for the bacteria that's there. We actually can look at all of the genes that are present in those bacteria. And so what we do with that is we can look for the types of genes that digest a certain type of fiber. We can look for the types of genes that produce a certain short chain fatty acid. We are very soon going to come out with carbohydrate digestion. So we are constantly able to look for functional capacity in addition to what microbes are there. So this can just it provides a different type of insight into the function of the microbiome, and not just which bacteria are present and at which levels. What other questions do we have about the technology behind Tiny Health? All right, great. And then the other thing that I do like to point out is we are very action-based. And so for any results if we say that something needs support, we also will provide actionable steps to address the area that needs support. And so some other tests, they will give you the information, but they will not give you actionable steps on how to address any imbalances. So we ensure that for insights that we have an approach, supplement, dietary, lifestyle that can help to shift the microbiome community. And then we also have recommendations for symptoms. So sometimes we don't necessarily expect it to shift the microbiome, but we want to provide actionable steps for families to take if their kiddo is experiencing something like eczema. And so in addition to shifting, some microbiomes don't actually need a lot of shifting. The community looks pretty good, but we still have things that we can recommend to help parents with symptoms. And then I also just like to point out, so turnaround time is something that comes up a lot with practitioners, because the last thing you want to do is wait for months to get your test results back to take action for your patients. And so at this time, we do have a 3 to 5 week turnaround for results. Many results are coming back in less than 4 weeks. And then the expert review component is something that takes another 1 to 2 weeks to follow, because it's a personalized report that comes with the results. But the results do come back in that 3 to 5 week time frame. And if there's also an option for expedited results, which then guarantees that they will come back also with the expert review within 2 to 3 weeks. All right. Does anybody have any questions before I continue on?
Wait, so sorry, you were saying that it takes after the 3 to 5 weeks, it takes another 2 to 3 to receive the review, the personalized review?
So yeah, and this is separate from the action plan. So what comes out when the results are ready is all of the data, all of our analysis of the data, as well as the action plan, the action steps that you can take. So you receive all that information. So there's nothing that hinders the ability to act on the results. The expert review, and I will show you this when I open up the our example case, but the expert review is designed to help people understand, of all the actions that you're listing, like what's sort of my main finding, what's the priority action that I can do. And so it's just one step further, helping to pull out the most critical information. Our goal with the expert review is, if someone looked at their data and was like, what's one thing I can do? Like, what's the one thing out of all of this that should help with that? So also as practitioners, if you are using this test with your clients or your patients, the expert review is similar to the type of work that the practitioner would do. However, as a practitioner who gets to work with your patient in person or have more of a dialogue, you can also incorporate changes that have happened since sampling, things that they've tried before. Even more, like we try to get a very nuanced information about survey, what they've done in the past, but nothing replaces that human conversation with someone who's able to take up-to-date information and incorporate that into the plan. And also, I think with a practitioner walking someone through the results, you can just get so much more information out of the results than somebody can get all that information. You're just able to expedite that process for them by helping with the interpretation. Our goal is to be incredibly user-friendly, but I just think with anything really, complex microbiome, complex health, it's always beneficial to have someone else to help guide you through it. And if you're doing other labs as well, the practitioner can also incorporate the microbiome testing in consideration with other labs that have also been taken, or other measures or tests that have been done.
I have a question there. I know this is direct to consumer, but is there a platform for us to order for patients, or?
Fabulous question. So I will tease this a little bit. I will talk about this more at the end, but we do have a practitioner partnership or practitioner membership program that we launched. I sent the email out on Monday, so it's been a couple of days. And so it's very things. It's very much in the development phase, but we wanted to start incorporating our practitioners who we've currently met with and get them hooked into the membership program. And part of the membership program will be a practitioner portal. This is something that our developers are currently working on. To be transparent, our estimated release of that is early Q1, so early 2023. February is about the estimated time that would be ready, because we are working on figuring out how you can order for patients, and you can also have patients order for themselves, and you can see all those results in one place. And so,
so currently results go directly to the
Yes. So the way that it works now is when you work with a patient or a client, you would have to inform them the login that you make. If you could share that with me, and then you can also log in when the results are ready and see the portal, but it would be a shared login at this time. So something we are currently figuring out how to optimize, because I know that is a huge benefit for you're busy
Support.
trying to manage multiple different people's login information. So we know from like a professionalism standpoint and a ease of use standpoint that portal will be very important. So high on the priority list. Okay, great. Yeah, wonderful question. Okay, so I would love to dive into actually showing you what tiny health looks like. So before we log into the portal, one thing I just like to pull up is this kid's overall microbiome community. I think that this is just such a powerful visualization of how important tiny health is. So his first sample at 5 months was dominated by unfriendly bacteria, pro-inflammatory bacteria. And mom got these results and was on a subscription plan, and her next kit came about the 7 month time frame, and she just hadn't gotten around to, life gets busy. Having a 5-month-old is very busy. She just hadn't decided on a probiotic. It was something she was like, oh, I'll choose one. And then the next kit came and she hadn't done it. And so she took her next sample. So that between the 5-month and the 7-month time point, there was no interventions at all, sort of status quo. And so we see there are some beneficials showing up, but still dominated by, or not dominated, but many higher unfriendlies than we would like to see. This unknowns are sneaking in. And then at between the 7-month and the 10-month time point, she saw the next results and she was like, okay, I got to choose a probiotic. She chose a probiotic, a bifidobacterium-based probiotic, and a few months later, at the 10-month time point, we see a huge shift towards beneficial bacteria, namely mostly the Bifidobacterium infantis that's in Evivo. And we see a gut community that is much more what we would expect in a healthy baby microbiome. And so I think that this is a great example of, of course, we wish that she had taken some earlier action, but thankfully her kiddo has not developed any sort of conditions and so I think that it just goes to show that, the ability to test the microbiome and also see the effect of what you're doing, and that the recommendations we provide can have a very powerful effect. I think that this is a beautiful example of that. All right, so let's actually dive into the website. So sorry, I seem to have lost the window. All right, so this is an example of a family who has completed tiny health tests. And so this is what pops up when you have the expert review. So you get your note, but it reminds you, don't forget to look at the rest of the action plan. This is really just your biggest action item that you can follow. And so this is a 13-month-old who has tested a couple times with Tiny Health. And if we go to the very first gut test, we see that at his 7-day-old sample, he had 16% beneficial, 37% unfriendly, 44% variable. So this is sort of, I like to look at the summary and sort of the 50,000-foot view of just how is everybody playing with each other. There's sort of a ratio of the beneficial to the unfriendlies to the variables that we expect to see, which varies by age. And so ideally in infants, we want to see a predominance of bifidobacterium in the early gut. And unfortunately here in the earliest sample, we didn't see any bifidobacterium. So then I go over to the key insights. This is sort of the meat and potatoes that tells us, okay, you see the overall community of what's in the gut, but the key insights is where we've looked at what actually is comprising each of those parts of the microbiome and broken it down into actionable key insights. And we do that with a need support section, an okay, and a great. So need support are areas that we recommend taking action to help shift the microbiome. Okay results are something to keep an eye on, but no action is particularly necessary. Overall microbiome health can help improve those metrics. And then great is nothing to do, looking good for their age. And then other insights, we still include them even if they're not relevant for the age group. So for example, microbiome diversity is not something that we would want to see a lot of in a baby gut. And so this is a metric that pops up for kids more after the first year of life when they're enthusiastically eating solids, and we want to see that healthy diversity to help reduce risk of atopic conditions. And then we see over on the right-hand side is the action plan. And so the action plan has steps that you can take to address all the areas that need support. So for example, the fact that there's an overabundant species here, we saw elevated ruminococcus novis, which is associated, if having high levels of this early in life is associated with inflammatory conditions such as eczema. And so you can see here that there's actions to help reduce the ruminococcus novis, but also when we click into it, we see that the bifidobacterium probiotic in an HMO supplement, either supplementing formula or providing breast milk, there's all of these benefits that it has. And that's because for babies, the number one thing is to have the gut dominated by bifidobacterium. And so we can see here that almost all of the, or actually all of the need supports can be tackled through this action. And then we also provide links to products that have passed our vetting process. What we look for in products are high quality ingredients. So it's not just about having the right bacteria, it's about making sure that there's not some other less ideal ingredients in there. It's about having species, ideally strain level information on what is in the product. And we look for products that have some amount of clinical efficacy associated with it. So many of these companies have done studies to show that they actually do work. And then there are a couple in here that we have added, even though they don't necessarily have the clinical studies, but because at this point we see so many baby microbiomes and we see so many probiotic options that parents have chosen. And so some of these are ones that we have just seen ourselves work so well, and they're allergen free and a good option for kiddos to take. And so they've passed our threshold in terms of our experience with their efficacy.
I just have a quick question.
Yeah.
If you have a child, I see some of them here, but if there's a child that's very sensitive to milk products or just can't digest milk, do you also recommend that? Because I see the BioCult here that's got the cow's milk in it, but let's say you have a child that's sensitive to cow's milk or has an allergy, would you recommend something else that they could take there?
Yep. So we have these three options are all allergen free: dairy, gluten, soy, egg, shellfish, nuts, all allergen free here.
Oh, okay. I see it. Smidge. Got it. Okay. Wonderful.
Yeah, because it's a really good point. There are a lot of products that do contain cow's milk. And then also we do, for babies who are breastfeeding, we do recommend an HMO supplement, or if you're an older kiddo who's, significantly weaned down on breast milk. However, the caveat with this is even though HMOs are, these products do not often contain casein and whey, which are the proteins that are often sort of the trigger for many milk dairy sensitivities. We do have a caveat in the expert review that says, these do contain, while they don't often contain the triggering aspect of dairy products, they do contain some amount. And so that's sort of where parents can have a conversation with their practitioner about. Some parents are like, my kid can't even look at milk, and they start having symptoms. Other families are like, we just avoid providing large amounts of it, but trace amounts in a product would be okay. And so that's where when I do consultations with people, I'm able to provide that information. But as a practitioner, and I can provide that in the expert review, but as a practitioner, it's so great when families can have those types of nuanced conversations about choosing the right product for them.
Oh, thank you. That's amazing.
Yeah, great question.
I have a question. Did you say that you're asking parents before they're sending the lab in these questions, like what are they currently on?
Yes, great. Sorry, I did not review sort of the so in when families get a kit. So as a practitioner, there's two ways that if you're a practitioner member, you will get a code that you can order on behalf of your patients. And then all the billing goes through your practice. And then the shipping address would be for the patients. And so they just get the kit, but it's paid for, ordered by your practice. And so you can roll that into your overall fee. The other option is, if that's not the way that your practice works, you can also have a code to provide patients the same practitioner discount, but then they would do that. They would do all the payment themselves, and then they would ship the product to themselves. So that's sort of, as a practitioner, the two ways that you can order a test for patients. And then
Wait.
once they get, go ahead.
Sorry. Oh, yeah. No, you're going to answer it. I thought maybe I didn't. Go ahead.
Yeah, and so then once the patient or the customer gets the test, they do the sample, and then along with the sample, based on their age, they get a whole set of surveys.
Gotcha.
Everybody fills out a health history survey, and that's filled out one time. That's to get a sense of what conditions do you have you had in the past. And then with every sample, there's a sample survey. That gives us a sense of current dietary practices, current supplementation, current probiotics. They are pretty darn extensive surveys. When I did mine, I just had the health history and a sample survey. I'd say it probably took me about 20 minutes to complete them. And there wasn't a lot of complexity that I had to fill in. So I think it can take anywhere from 15 minutes to half an hour, just depending on the level of detail that someone chooses to provide. We love detail. We try to make it very user-friendly by providing a lot of multiple choice options, so it's less free text, but we also provide options for people to write in like anything else they want us to know, elaborate on the previous question. And then for babies, you get moms get a birth and pregnancy survey, and that goes into details about how pregnancy went, mode of delivery, what happened during delivery. And we do even get as nuanced as, like, do you remember how many exams you had during your labor? Because we know that if you're having multiple exams, that can just introduce different microbes into the vaginal canal, which can affect seeding. So we try to get very nuanced for things not only that go into our current evaluations, but also that can be useful for understanding microbiome in the future through, analysis of our results.
It's going to give you a great data set.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And in addition, as we develop new insights, it does allow us to be like, oh, we should pull this survey in now and comment on it because we've developed a new insight. So like one that we just released, it's still in beta, is obesity later in life associations. We know that the early life microbiome has associations with later life body mass index and how adiposity and muscle mass. And so, this is something that eventually we could, correlate with what percentile babies are in when they take the sample.
And the health history, you said that they fill out, is it online as well, or is it paper version that they send?
It's all online.
Okay.
And currently it's something that we see on our end, but we are in the process of developing something that will go on the summary page, where we will have a review of sort of the most pertinent answers that they gave us to help them to provide their personalized report. But then we also will have a link there where people will be able to see all the answers that they provided. And so that's something that's in process, because we know people fill out the survey a couple of weeks before, or the health history survey, that's something they only fill out once. So if they're doing multiple samples, so it'd be nice for people to be able to review, practitioners to be able to review. And we also want to have a way that people can provide additional information, because things come up between sampling that people want to share with us.
So we would be able to eventually see their health history and all the forms that they're filling in.
Yeah, and there would be, of course, like HIPAA compliance, and
Sure.
I don't think we technically fall under HIPAA, but we want to be very sensitive and protective of people's information. So I think that's part of the development of the practitioner portal, is making sure that we are doing our due diligence to have informed consent and all of that wonderful
Cool.
stuff. Yeah. So that's sort of the big, and then the other aspects we have of here, we talked about the microbiome breakdown. Baby gut type there's 7 different gut types that we've developed at Tiny Health, and it's a comment on what is dominating the gut microbiome. So for this kiddo, we've seen quite an array of like a shift in their microbiome. And so at this, their very first time point at 7 days, they had a type 7B, which is associated with diversity, sort of less or no in bacteria. This is something we actually expect to see in kids as they're transitioning to solids, because we want to start to see that diversity. So this is a less ideal gut type in a baby. But then we see, that's 13 months old. Ooh. In the 6-month time point, they actually had a shift in their microbiome to type 2B, and that is lower bifidobacterium, which we still want to see, but they got an increase in the Bacteroides, which also can have some HMO digestion capacity. And so is associated with some benefits. It's not as ideal as gut type 1A, which is dominated by bifidobacterium, but it's a shift in the right direction. And then the other section of the report that we have is our conditions section. And this is where Tiny Health has developed microbiome signatures based off of research for specific ages, about a microbiome signature for different atopic march conditions. And so we can click in here and see which bacteria are present that are associated with decreased risk, which are present associated with increased risk, and what levels they're at. Because it's not just about what's there, it's about how they're all playing together in a community that can tell you whether or not there's a signature for a condition. And so this is something that's really helpful to check in on, and in case, we can just sort of assess if this is an area that we need to address. Oftentimes we'll see kids flagged for conditions because they aren't getting that beneficial diversity early in life. So that's something helpful, in addition to lots of bifidobacterium, checking in that we're also having a little bit of that healthy diversity to help reduce risk of these conditions. And then if you're an adult, we have gestational diabetes and preterm birth microbiome signatures as well. And then the last thing is, if mom sends in a sample close to delivery or within the first 6 months, we can do microbiome seeding. And this is really neat because it can tell you what percentage of the microbes came from mom and which percentage of the microbes came from the environment, and then breaking those down by beneficial, unfriendly variable. So we can see that from mom, 3% beneficial, lots of variable, and all of the unfriendlies that most of the unfriendlies that we're seeing did actually come from the environment, which is not necessarily unexpected, but this is interesting information. So those are all, that's sort of the overview. I can briefly touch on as well. So that's for a baby. We also have his brother who took a sample at around 2 years old and around 3 years old. And here we can see the different kids who are eating solid foods enthusiastically. So interestingly, we can look at like short chain fatty acid production is in the, okay area. And just everything is kind of in the typical low end of typical for production. So we actually offer different specific foods that parents can offer their children to help boost different types of fiber digestion, short chain fatty acid production. Because I think, when someone tells me like, oh, just eat healthy, like eat a lot of plants, I'm like, okay, but what does that mean? Like, which ones do I choose when I go to the grocery store? So I think this could be really helpful for like, oh, pectin foods are really helpful for my kids' microbiome specifically. And then we provide specific foods that are pectin-rich foods. For things like fermented foods, we have a couple of links to recipes that are a bit more on the kid-friendly side. So like, who doesn't like pancakes? And so, we try to help not only just inform like, oh, you should do more of this type of food, but to give very specific examples to try and take some of that mental energy of trying to figure out like, okay, well, what's a pectin-rich food? What are some things I can do to get my kid to eat fermented foods? So just a little bit of a difference in terms of the types of recommendations that we provide for older kiddos. Yeah, so I want to make sure that there's time for questions about, or like anything else that you want to see more information on in terms of the results. Okay, great. Well,
I
if there's
have
no other,
questions. I don't want to dominate. Is
yeah,
it okay?
Yeah, and I'm
Could I-
also happy to do follow-ups at any time
Oh.
too. So yeah, definitely let me know what your questions are, and then we'll see what we can address during this time.
Oh, just have a question about like, do you have like candida markers, or it looks like parasites and infection? I'd love to know more about like what you're picking
Yeah.
up.
So for opportunistic pathogens, we have Candida
And C. diff,
here.
great.
And we also have, C. diff. We also have H. pylori, which many people are
Right.
interested in. And we also have group B strep.
Strep.
So this is particularly important for moms who are trying to conceive or pregnant to know there are steps you can take prior to delivery to try and reduce the risk of needing antibiotics during that the labor time point.
Do you know just off the
and-
top of your head what the threshold is that you guys, consider healthy?
So our threshold for measuring is 0.05%, so 0.5%. If
Okay.
it's detected under 0.5%, we don't report that.
Okay.
We just don't have the same level of confidence that we do for things above that measure. And then here, we are going to start providing borderline to let people know it's high, but it's not necessary. It's not like high. And then we also are working on incorporating more bars to let people know sort of where they fall compared to the general public or to the average. And so like, for example, like while this is high, it's not overwhelmingly high. And so I think we are trying to work on a way to differentiate sort of like, because especially E. coli, I think this comes up so often. If there's any amount of E. coli, parents get very concerned because it's something we hear a lot about in our modern society. And we do have, like, we have all these reference ranges. They're just in our bioinformatics section of our internal processing. But we do have like specific cutoffs for different ages because we know that, young babies are, permitted and supposed to have more of these pro-inflammatory immune stimulating bacteria than adults are. So actually, if you have no Enterobacteriaceae as a baby, we actually flag that as something that needs support. Whereas in an adult, it would be fine if you didn't have those, because your immune system has mostly learned what it's going to learn at that point.
Do you report on other Clostridia species, like in different places, or?
So you
Like,
can find anything that's detected will show up here.
Okay.
So you could always. So I just kind of, I do a control F if I'm looking for something
Got it.
specific. So we do see that there's this one,
Okay.
that one. Yeah. So so everything is reported here down to that 0.5%.
Got it.
And then the other thing that was asked about was parasites and infections. So this is just in a different category because these are things that if we detect at all, we will flag it as need and support. Opportunistic pathogens are just that. We don't want to give them the opportunity to start misbehaving, so we want to keep them within a certain range. But these are ones that if they're detected, we want to let you know, chat with your healthcare provider, particularly if you're having symptoms. The one caveat I would say is, if you are looking for something in particular, 16S is the type of technology that you can say like, go, it's like a little, search and detect like missile. It's like, here is a piece of Candida, find anything that matches that. So that technology is able to like go detect something at a very, 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 very low level, amplify it so much to the point that you can tell that it's there. So we have seen some slight differences between our tests and some other tests in terms of detecting things like H. pylori or Candida. My thoughts around that is, we will detect it if it's there at 0.5% or more. And so if it is there at lower levels, while it's not impossible for it to be causing some issues, I think it's less likely to be contributing to something that, and I think maybe the cost benefit of trying to take a lot of antifungals or antibiotics for something that is present at such low levels might not, the cost benefit might be more in the cost arena for me in terms of that. And that's one of the benefits of shotgun metagenomics, is you truly get a sense of relative abundance. So you can actually tell, like, this is so low that it's even below our level, our threshold for detection. But I do like to point out that caveat because we have seen some slight differences in those measures.
And just to know, where would you find the SCFA production if it didn't come up as one of these? Like, would that be in your key insights, like at the bottom, if it didn't come up in okay results, great results?
So it will always, that's one that will
It'll
come
always
up
come
in
Okay.
yeah. But like sleep associations are more targeted towards younger babies. Like that's just the research that we've done for that group. So it's great out here. But our philosophy is provide all of the information we have
Right.
and try to just educate people on the applicability of it. But if we have it, we like to share it. And that's also why we release our beta insights while we're also in the work, like while we're developing our action items around it, because we like to just share the information that we have. It's like histamine production. There should be action cards for that very soon, but right now it's in beta. So we just report it, but the actions don't pop up quite yet.
Great.
And you mentioned you're coming out with like the carbohydrates, whatever you're saying. Do you know when that is going to be happening?
I want to say within the next 1 to 2 weeks.
Okay.
Might be a little bit longer. It's like the functional ones are very, very deep. A lot of work on the science teams, but I know that they're actively working on it. So I think it's going to be within the next, we'll say 1 to 3 weeks. Give a little bit more window, but it should be soon. And the great thing is anytime we release a new key insight, it populates into any sample that's been taken previously. So of course, if it was a sample like 6 months ago, probably a lot's changed at that point. For adults, we expect the microbiome to be fairly consistent, but if you've taken a lot of action since then, I've seen a lot of microbiomes in adults shift on resamples. But we always provide you with the information. If we've developed a key insight, we will provide that information for any sample that's been taken previously.
I have another question if you're
Yeah, I love it.
privately too. Sorry. Are you guys thinking about potentially using, like, looking for markers for like ADHD, autism type thing?
Yeah, it's definitely on our list. I think because the science is still so early that and it's, I think, something that is very sensitive for parents and something that, we just would want to be so conscious of the way that we're communicating about it.
For sure.
Because it can be, unless you've been in the world of medicine and science and healthcare for a long time, even just the difference between causation and correlation, association, like we're trying to figure out how to explain the difference between associations and signatures for our conditions. And I think, that's something that it's something that we do want to look into. We know it's something that is so helpful and important for parents, but doing so in a way that is in line, where the research is at and the communication around that. So I think, it's a little bit less intensive to put out like a sleep association.
I would love to talk to you about it after, because I have some ideas that maybe would be less like scary, I guess, for parents.
Yeah.
Still supportive.
Yeah.
I'm just seeing so many kiddos. And it's so gut related, right? And you see such a huge transformation. So anyway, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, definitely on the list and something that we are eager to dive more into and report on.
Cool.
Yeah. Okay, so I will pop back. I just want to make sure I share about our membership program. And then I will send the recording out. I also am happy to continue chatting about our insights. We didn't really get a chance to talk about the vaginal microbiome, but I'd just like to point out that we do have that because it gets overshadowed by the gut test sometimes. But similar to the baby gut type, we have community state types for the vaginal microbiome. We have the same need support. Okay, great classifications. And this is just an example of a woman that we had who has had some difficulty with conception, a prior miscarriage. And we did actually detect uroplasma in her vaginal microbiome. And again, it's one piece of the puzzle. It's not saying that that is what's causing her difficulties with conception or previous experience, but it's something that we can help to tackle and try to remove as a potential contributor to inflammation that could be contributing to her experience. And then we also similarly have action plans for the things that we find in the vaginal microbiome. So can always do like a more in-depth vaginal microbiome review. I just like to point out that it's also something that we offer and really a powerful tool in conjunction with the gut test for moms who are trying to conceive or pregnant or just want to know about their vaginal health. Okay, so membership program. We recently launched this and we created it with the input from, we had a number of sessions like this before creating the membership to figure out what do practitioners want, what do practitioners need in order to feel confident in using this test. So one of the main things, of course, is if you're using, many tests for your patients, we want to help offset that cost. Either offset the cost for the practitioner or pass that discount on to your patients. Whichever way practitioners want to use that discount, we are fans of. And so with the practitioner membership, we offer a $30 discount on each kit. Also with membership, we offer unlimited support. So one-on-one, you get some patient results back. You want to chat about them before you chat with the patient. We can set up a call. We're available by email. We're going to host support hours where you can just kind of do a drop-in. Any way that you want support, we want to support your meeting with you to improve your ability to communicate with your patients. We also are developing that practitioner portal, and that will be available to our members. We will have live webinars, exclusive events for members, an ability to request topics that you want to go over. And so sort of like in this type of session, but we can dive specifically into one key insight, or we can go more in depth on the vaginal microbiome test. So really whatever education, in addition to the wealth of educational materials that we will be developing in the very near future. We also have a community, a Slack community. Many practitioners are practicing remote, they're practicing individually, or they're in a small practice. And so the ability to not only chat with us, but also to check in with other practitioners to see, does anybody do this type of test, or has anybody found, that this in conjunction with this condition. I think it's just nice, particularly if you practice more individually or in a smaller practice, to be able to reach out to other people that have a like-minded mindset. If you're at Tiny Health, something about the way that you practice, the way that you think about medicine, there's a similarity that we all share. And then also we are developing a patient referral process so we can talk about all things microbiome, but there are some consult calls or some parents that I chat with who are like, what do I do about my kid's constipation? I've tried so many things. There's some microbiome things we can potentially tackle, but they just need more support than we're able to provide here since we are not a medical practice. And so we have found that the ability to provide names of people who practice remotely or even in their area who do have this type of mindset and are familiar with Tiny Health, to be able to pass on that information and to have the patients, do their own due diligence, but, you are all people we've met with, and we would like to be able to provide that information to people who are looking for additional support, or someone who can meet with them and talk about the results and, more, while we provide consultations, it's not really a primary part of what we anticipated to be part of our business. So we might grow it, but ideally we would love the trained practitioners to be able to provide that sort of consultation and support in a more long-term way to people who use Tiny Health. So that is the membership program. And then we want to partner with people who are not ready to become practitioner members. And so we provide the same basic support that we provide for anybody who does a Tiny Health test, access to recorded educational content, and then a $20 discount on kits at this time. And so just less of the practitioner perks that we think will help with the ease of using the test. And at this time we are, so the other column here is just the Tiny Plus, which is our membership for customers. There is a slightly deeper discount on kits, but that's because there's only 2 free consultations a year, and none of the other practitioner specific perks. but they have the customer membership and the practitioner membership have the same membership fee. At this point, for practitioners that we are meeting with for the first year, particularly given that, this is a very recently launched, many aspects are in development. We are providing the normal membership fee is $199 annually, but for practitioners who are, early supporters of Tiny Health, we are offering $100 off of that membership fee. And so I will send information. We have a website that you can peruse more for the membership program, but I will send everybody the recording of our call today, as well as information about membership and ways to sign up for that or learn more. But that's really what I have on. I know we're a little after the 10 o'clock time, so I want to say, if you want to log off, please feel free. I want to respect everybody's time. I am happy to stick around, answer any questions, but I just so appreciate all the work that you do and the passion that you have for providing health in such a holistic and, really getting to root causes approach. I think that it's just really beautiful, and families are so lucky to have you. So I appreciate your time today. And yeah, I will stick around till nobody has any questions left.
Thank you so much. This was wonderful.
Oh, great. I'm so glad you were able to make it.
Thank you.
That's really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Ask if a mom and a baby got the test done, would that be 2 separate consults, or would that be 1?
So for our for customers, we have a half an hour for consults. Oh yes. Oh my gosh, I love that you have your little one. I don't get to see little ones as much now that I'm not practicing in pediatrics, so it just warms my heart. Hi. So it's a time based, so we can use that time however people would like. For practitioners, unlimited support if you're a member. So yeah, we can talk about all of the tests, but I find that for customers, we are able to address multiple tests in one 30-minute consultation call. It's just a little bit less in depth potentially, but we also, one of the things I like about that is we can talk about connections between mom, baby, similarities. And so, yeah, but we can talk about whatever in any consultation call.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for being here.
Bye.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for being here today. I know that I've been on the emails. I'm so sorry. I was focused on getting the membership out, and I was like,
I'm sure
I
you're
didn't chime in on the
incredibly busy. No, I am so excited about it, and it's specifically with a few clients that I have right now that I'd really like to be testing. So I really appreciate your time.
Yeah. And so did I see correctly? You have a PhD, is that correct? And you did
Yeah.
like basic science research in the microbiome at Emory?
Yeah, so I went the kind of human bio route so that I could take all the, microbiology, immunology, and kind of a diverse, more broad take, because I really wanted to also know the environmental effects, like how much environment and culture and, food but just really the, built environment effects as well. So
and Emory is the place for that. I interviewed there for residency, and it was very high on my list. Just the conversations I had with people about like environmentalism and the role of climate change on the microbiome in kids. I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing.
Yeah. And they had really early on, they had a bunch of, virologists, and then they had a bunch of, vaccination studies, efficacy with microbiome. And so they it's been, and it also, the CDC is right around the corner. And so there's just a lot of crosstalk.
Yeah.
That I enjoy.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was so excited when you said Emory. I still think, everywhere I interviewed, after every interview, I was like, that's my number one. There's so much great research at like all these institutions.
Where did you end up doing residency?
I went to Boston Children's, and I did my intern year there. And then that's when I decided to start looking at other options on how to be part of the health community. And, I was going into NICU. I love NICU. I just love the babies, but I knew I wanted to do microbiome work. I knew I wanted to get more into the health tech arena. And I just thought about how much more training I had. I did an MD PhD, so I was already, quite a bit older than my colleagues. And I thought, I could do all this training and then end up going into a totally different type of job, or I could see if I could make that transition now. And I think the universe was like, yes, now here's Cheryl, here's Tiny Health. And I was like, wow, this could not, like,
What
every
a
single thing I
cool
wanted to
niche.
do. Yeah.
That's amazing. That's kind of how I
Yeah.
feel too. I was like, exactly how will I apply all of this information that I, this weird, diverse, like niche that really could make a big difference. So yeah, it's so
Yeah.
cool. And
Yeah.
so you then finished residency and then you were like, no, you didn't. Good for you.
Nope. I did my intern year. I took my boards examination so I can do licensing.
Good for
And
you.
yeah, I just thought really hard about what else was I going to learn that was going, I mean, of course, I would have learned a ton, but I just thought
Right.
about, the cost to just my mental health and to just, the way I was living my life and the benefit that I would
Absolutely.
receive in terms of additional training. And I thought, between my science background and the medical
Totally.
experience that I did get, I'm so glad I did my intern year. I thought that was really, very critical
Valuable.
to actually be in the hospital and treat patients. And, but yeah, I just thought, I think that, and then when I met Cheryl and learned about Tiny Health, I thought, like, this is not something that I can pass up. Like, no, I don't want to wait 2 more years to join a company that I think is just, I mean, this is such a game changer. I think it's going to change the world.
I agree. I absolutely agree. I'm so excited you guys are up and coming.
Yeah.
So I have I'm so right now in the world of like toddlers through early like I don't know, school children, right? Like early school children. And I'm just seeing so many diagnoses being thrown around, right? Like ADHD, but I feel like one way that you can get in with parents without freaking them out is potentially looking at behaviors, right? And supporting them in like, is your child having a hard time focusing? Or, it's like the I was just thinking this, the whole what's it called? Biohacking community. Like they're so focused on get, brain, have brain focus, like have better mental focus, get rid of your brain fog and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, these kids like need that advocacy too. It's like, people don't, it's just not like, I think if you start asking questions about that, like mood and behavior, you'll get a ton of insight into kind of what's going on. And these kids, I mean, it's like the difference when they're supported. I mean, their gut health immediately, they're so resilient, but they just need that support. And then the actionables. And I think you guys have such a great infrastructure of starting to support people in a tangible action. But like, maybe, I don't know, just putting out there, because it would be, I'm just seeing such, and the parents just aren't making that connection. So I feel like you guys have that opportunity to be like, hey, if, this could be something, I don't know. Is this
no, I think that's, totally. I think it's so great. Cause also I think that there's sometimes like we should be approaching it more, because we don't do diagnostics. We should be really approaching things from a symptom space. Like, does your kid experience difficulty with focusing, or like, does your kid like, how social is your child? If we frame it like that, I think it also lends support to parents who don't have an official diagnosis, or it's more subclinical. I think that could be really helpful. We do get a lot of families here who are like, that we've all the diagnostics, nothing's been found, but that's just because we have specific labels with specific criteria that someone decided that that's the things you have to meet to get a diagnosis. But that doesn't mean that you're not having inflammation. That doesn't mean that you don't have some aspect of, behavioral or mental health. It just doesn't meet criteria for a diagnosis. Yeah. And I think also it's a great way to catch like, oh yeah, my kid does have some difficulties with focus, to try and be preventative. And because then they might notice that and think, oh, I really should take action on this. And if we can reduce, the inflammation that's contributing to that gut brain axis development. So I think it just invites so much more people in, rather than either freaking them out and getting them anchored on a diagnosis, or having them just sort of bypass it because they're like, oh, not applicable for my kid. And I think that's a great, even with the obesity association later in life, I've kind of, wondered, I think that it could be beneficial to more talk about like body weight.
Right.
It's,
You don't want to trigger a mom when she's not getting sleep and
yeah, I mean, like, oh no, my baby's obese. Like,
totally.
no, that's not what
Yeah,
that means.
exactly. No, I actually saw a lot of that in my study was moms that were, and this was in El Salvador, what, you know, this part of it. And moms were trying to put kids on diets, you know, like
Yeah.
a few months old, and you're like, no, you know, please. No.
Yeah.
Yeah. So really good sensitivity. But yes, like I would love, and if you guys want any support with that, like designing, you know, symptoms based or more just like, you know, questioning and poking around. And I mean, it would give you guys a lot more information too, I think. And then there's something else that I was thinking. Yeah, that would be so helpful, I think, for me as a practitioner, for sure. Like to
Yeah.
get more idea of, and oh yeah, that's what I was gonna say. I love your like developmental focus. So, you know, at 15 months or 18 months, that's going to look different than at 3 years, right? But you can still like, there's like kind of, as you say, signatures of or like a suite of behavior that could, you know, maybe a few of those that might be for one kid versus, you know, and they show up differently, but it would be really interesting. I don't know if you want any support.
Yeah. I know. I think that's, and I do think that many studies are starting to look at less association with these big picture conditions and more associations with specific aspects or specific behaviors, specific components of it. So you really could have a collection of, you know, not just a signature, but a collection of microbiome signatures that are all under the category of brain function, or if you know, you could get more specific than that. But yeah, I think that could be very, very cool and very insightful.
And if you can catch that early, you can save the kids from the diagnoses for sure.
Yeah.
And support
absolutely.
families. That's the other thing I was thinking is, so I'm going to be working on a bunch of educational videos that are supporting moms and kids, or moms or caretakers, I guess, more generally in those actionables, in those specific actionables. And I haven't seen all of what you guys were, you know, this is the first time I'm really looking at your platform, but it's like a lot, like we're very much in line with like, you know, here. You know, whether it be like a fermented food or a specific polyphenol, you know, a specific whatever it is, and so and supporting them in practically incorporating those actions into your life. Which is just, I mean, you like you said, when you have a 5-month-old or a 6-month-old, you know, with colic or just regular crying rates, like you just want the specific actionable at that moment. So I would love to talk about working with you guys in any of those ways.
Amazing. In terms of next steps, are there, like, do you want to schedule time to do more of a deep dive? I know we had talked about doing a one-on-one in that email.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry to keep you. Yeah.
Oh, no. Well, actually, I guess I should look at my calendar. I have something else at some point this morning. Yeah, but I have time. But yeah, no, I want to make sure, like, just to support in whatever way.
Well, you know, Dr. Rommel wants to do some work with me, and I would love to. She just sent me over her password, and at some point, if we could have a call just to look at her, I haven't even logged in to see what her and her 2 kiddos, what it looks like, what her what the tests look like. But would you have time to just look through it with me at some point?
Yeah, absolutely.
That would be amazing.
Yeah, would love that.
Okay. I'm going to let you.
And do we want her, like, or she shared her password with you so we can go over that? Okay.
I can do an email just for her consent if you want, or she was really excited about that.
Yeah. I mean, if you have her password, I'm sure that's but okay, so she doesn't need to be there though. So we can schedule. Okay, yeah. So let's schedule something just because I want to make sure that
we're on the books.
We'll get on the books, and that way I just don't have to like rush off to my next meeting. But yeah, so I'll send you an email to follow up and schedule a time to do that.
Okay, perfect.
That would be great.
Thank you so much.
It's so nice to meet you. Yeah, so great.
Okay, bye.
Okay, talk soon. Bye.
Bye.